For decades, butter has been praised, then criticized, then quietly invited back to the table. One year, it's a comfort food your grandparents trusted. The next, it's something you're told to avoid, replace, or feel guilty about. If you've ever stood in the grocery aisle staring at spreads and labels, wondering what actually makes sense anymore, you're not alone. Nutrition advice has changed, marketing has gotten louder, and many people are left feeling confused about what's truly a reasonable choice for everyday health. If this sounds familiar, take a moment and share in the comments. What kind of butter or spread do you usually buy, and why? And stay with me. Because the real issue most people miss isn't butter at all. It's something far more subtle, and it might completely change how you look at that label in your hand. For a lot of people, confusion around food doesn't start with a diagnosis or a scary headline. It starts in the grocery store. You're standing in front of a shelf that should be simple, just butter and spreads, but suddenly it feels like a test you didn't study for. One label says light, another says plant-based, another promises it's heart-friendly. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're wondering how something that sat on your family table for generations became one of the most debated foods in modern nutrition. If you've ever felt unsure, frustrated, or even a little tired of trying to keep up with changing advice, that feeling makes sense, and you're definitely not alone. For most of the last century, butter was simply butter. It was used for cooking, baking, and everyday meals without much thought. Then, as nutrition science began focusing more closely on heart health, cholesterol, and long-term disease risk, dietary advice started to shift. Butter moved from being ordinary to being questioned. Alternatives appeared, marketed as modern, smarter choices. Over time, those messages piled up, and the result for many people today isn't clarity. It's confusion. One decade says avoid fat. Another says fat isn't the real problem. It's no wonder so many people feel like the rules keep changing. What's important to understand is that this constant back and forth didn't happen because people suddenly forgot how food works. It happened because science evolves, research methods improve, and food production itself has changed dramatically. At the same time, the food industry learned how powerful health-focused language could be. Words like light, balanced, natural, or heart-friendly don't just describe products. They shape how we feel about them. And that's where a lot of today's confusion really begins. Instead of asking whether butter itself is good or bad, a more useful conversation has been gaining attention in recent years. That conversation focuses on how processed a food is. Not all fats are created in the same way, and not all spreads are made with the same level of simplicity. Some foods are very close to their original form, while others go through multiple steps that change their texture, shelf life, and flavor. This doesn't automatically make them harmful, but it does change how they fit into everyday eating patterns. When foods become more processed, they often contain added ingredients designed to improve consistency, extend freshness, or meet certain marketing goals. These additions might not stand out at first glance, especially when the front of the package emphasizes health-related benefits. Over time, though, many people have started to notice a pattern. Foods that look similar on the outside can be very different on the inside. That's why health discussions today are shifting away from single ingredients and toward the bigger picture of food processing. Marketing plays a major role in shaping our choices, even when we think we're being careful. Labels are designed to be quick, reassuring, and emotionally appealing. A spread that highlights olive oil imagery may suggest a connection to traditional Mediterranean eating, even if olive oil isn't the main ingredient. A product labeled low-fat can feel like the responsible option, especially for people who grew up hearing that fat was something to limit. None of this means shoppers are careless. In fact, it means marketing is effective. Understanding labels doesn't require memorizing chemistry terms or following strict rules. It starts with slowing down and realizing that front-of-package claims are often just one small piece of the story. Ingredient lists, serving sizes, and overall context matter more than bold promises. Once people recognize that, shopping becomes less stressful. It turns from a test into a choice, and choice feels empowering rather than overwhelming. As people get older, this shift in perspective becomes even more important. Aging brings changes in appetite, digestion, energy levels, and lifestyle routines. Many adults start paying closer attention to how food makes them feel. Not in a dramatic way, but in subtle, everyday patterns. Feeling satisfied after meals, having steady energy, and enjoying food without guilt become priorities. That's where the conversation about fat quality comes in. Fats play several roles in food beyond flavor. They contribute to how filling a meal feels, how food is enjoyed, and how certain nutrients are absorbed. This doesn't mean more is always better, and it doesn't mean every type of fat works the same way for everyone. It simply means that focusing only on reducing fat, without considering its source or role, can miss the bigger picture. Many people find that when meals are balanced and satisfying, they're less likely to overthink every bite. This idea has led to a more calming approach to eating, one that emphasizes awareness rather than restriction. Instead of chasing perfection, people are encouraged to notice patterns. How often are certain foods eaten? How processed are they? How do they fit into daily routines? When food choices are viewed this way, there's less pressure to label anything as completely off limits or magically beneficial. It becomes about consistency and comfort over time. Choosing fats more mindfully doesn't require dramatic changes. It might mean rotating what you use instead of relying on one product for everything. It could involve paying attention to portion sizes without measuring every gram. It might simply mean cooking more often at home, where ingredients are familiar and predictable. These small adjustments add up, not because they're extreme, but because they're sustainable. One of the most helpful mindset shifts is letting go of the idea that a single food determines health outcomes. Health is shaped by patterns: sleep, movement, stress, social connection, and yes, diet. When food becomes a source of constant worry, it can create more tension than benefit. A calmer relationship with eating supports not just physical well-being, but mental and emotional balance too. This is especially relevant in a time when health information is everywhere. Social media, headlines, and viral videos often focus on extremes because they grab attention. But real, lasting wellness usually lives in the middle. It's found in habits that feel manageable and choices that don't require fear to maintain. Understanding food in context allows people to enjoy meals again, rather than seeing them as problems to solve. As you think about your own habits, it might help to reflect rather than judge. What foods feel familiar and satisfying? Which labels tend to catch your eye? Where did those ideas come from? There's no right or wrong answer, only awareness. And awareness is often the first step toward feeling more confident and less confused. If this conversation resonates with you, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. What part of food shopping feels most confusing right now? Or what label do you find yourself trusting the most? Your experience might help someone else realize they're not alone in feeling this way. If you found this discussion helpful, liking or sharing the video helps more people discover it too. And as we keep exploring everyday health topics together, there's more ahead. Because when it comes to long-term well-being, the most overlooked details are often the ones that make the biggest difference.